Today, we're going to talk about German anti-tank equipment that was used by Finland during World War II. This is part 2 of the anti-tank series, and today we're going to be focusing on the Panzerfaust and its variations, as well as the Panzerschreck. We're going to dive into the history and background of both of them, the experiences of Finnish soldiers on the ground, together with Finnish big army reports. As per usual, sources for pictures and information down below, and credit for the research goes almost 100% to the author over at jaegerplatoon.net. Check them out. The Panzerfaust started off as a project by Hugo Schneider Aktiengesellschaft Metallwarenfabrik, or HASAG, and aimed to combine a recoilless rifle with a high explosive anti-tank warhead. What made this possible was the discovery of the shaped charge effect in explosives. This was really high-speed military science in the Second World War, but today it's being used by everyone, everywhere, including insurgents lining tin cans with copper and ammonium nitrate fuel oil explosives to create these for less than $1 worth of ingredients. Back to Panzerfaust. The first name given to it in 1942 was Faustpatrone, which morphed into Faustpatrone Klein, 30 meters, and finally, when it was fielded in large scale, July 1943, it was called Panzerfaust Klein. Before we move on, I just want to mention the cheat sheet for the German terms, so you have an idea of what they were thinking at least. The Panzerfaust Klein was liked by the troops using it, even though the pointed shape of it caused it to deflect from the target if it was fired at too steep of an angle, and the range was rather limited. However, it still gave the user a decent standoff to the target itself. In September of 1944, a new version of the Panzerfaust was introduced, the Panzerfaust 30 Large. It had a more blunt shape, more penetrating power, but still had the same 30-meter range limitation. This was soon replaced by the Panzerfaust 60, which, you guessed it, had a range of 60 meters instead of 30 meters, whilst keeping the blunted shape and penetration capabilities of the Panzerfaust Large. For late war Germany, this weapon would go on to become the most common variant on the battlefield, and it's the most recognizable today. The development eventually led to the Panzerfaust 100, which was introduced in January of 1945. The Panzerfaust 100 saw only limited combat use because the war was not going that great for Germany at this point. The Finns first became aware of the Panzerfaust in January of 1944, and as Oliver North said about the Iran-Contras, they thought it was a neat idea. They placed an order, and in April the same year, 1,700 Panzerfaust Klein would arrive, along with some Panzerschreck, which we'll get to later. In Finland, these were eventually renamed to Panzerschreck and designated the F1, whilst the improved Panzerfaust with a 60-meter range was designated the F2. The shipment could not have arrived in a better time, since the Soviet summer offensive of 1944 was about to kick off, which for the Finns meant the largest concentration of men and material, notably tanks, being pushed against them since the Winter War. The newer Soviet tank models were so well armored that the vast majority of Finnish anti-tank weapons could not penetrate them. In layman's terms, anything below 75mm didn't work. The Panzerfaust, however, proved to be an effective way of giving infantry an integrated anti-tank weapon with at least some standoff. But as always, with the Finns and German weapons, there were a few issues. Number 1, secrecy. The Germans demanded absolute secrecy about the weapon system, which forced the Finns to stockpile them far behind friendly lines, where not even the 60-meter range of the F2 could be used effectively. This also meant that when the summer offensive came along, less than 200 men had been given training on the use of the Panzerfaust. This all seemed a bit excessive since many Panzerfausts had already been captured by Red Army forces. Number 2. Panzerfaust Shoulder. This was the early days of what would become shoulder-fired rockets, but in these early days, soldiers without training could be seen using the Panzerfaust either over the shoulder, under the shoulder, or in the armpit, and unfortunately sometimes with the butt of the rocket tube resting on the shoulder just like a rifle, which would test the recoilless feature of the rocket. This would result in an accurate shot followed by a rapid deconstruction of the operator's upper body as the exhaust from the propellant charge took the path of least resistance through muscle and bone. Number 3. Training. The only training material given to the Finns were the German field guides included in the shipping crates of the Panzerfaust. This meant that only German-speaking Finns and the rumor mill were available to give training on the weapon. See the previous point. This led to the creation of a training version that used 32 ACP blanks and fired a reusable projectile, being created at the officer's school. In September of 1944, 1,200 training versions were ordered along with 500 blanks per weapon. But with something that is becoming an ominous meme on this channel, we don't know what happened next because the war ended. In reality, the first time the median Finnish soldier used this weapon, it was in anger against a Soviet tank and not on a shooting range. Number 4. Consumable. The first shipment of 1,700 was a considerable amount, but in reality it was enough to field one German division with sufficient numbers of them, not an entire national conscript army. From what I've been able to gather, something like 20,000 Panzerfausts would be the total amount available to the Finns during the entirety of World War II. But only 3,900 of them had been used in battle before the end of the war. And number 5, the whole damn thing. The yellowish-brown color didn't work for Finnish terrain and had to be repainted. The primers were shit and caused malfunctions if the weapon was wet. The range was shit, you could literally throw a rock further. The ricochet risk, because of the bulbous shape of the warhead. The list goes on and on and on. The Panzerschreck differs from the Panzerfaust in a few ways. Mainly, it's reloadable and, based on the US bazooka, had a larger caliber and considerably bulkier in construction. It held a edge over the Panzerfaust in both range and penetration, although it required a team of 2 to operate effectively. The official name for the weapon was 8.8 cm RPZB.54, meaning 8.8 cm rocket anti-tank rifle, but it became known as the Panzerschreck, literally meaning tank terror, or the terror of tanks. In Finland, this name would be an instant hit, and the troops called them Panzerikahu, which is a direct translation of Panzerschreck. The first production runs of the weapon caused the same amount of terror to the tanks as it did to the operator, because the rocket engines wouldn't stop burning for 2 meters. This meant that it threw a lot of rocket exhaust right back in the shooter's face. The solution for this was first to wear a gas mask and protective gloves, but later the addition of a sheet metal plate that covered the shooter's face and hands were becoming popular in the field and integrated in the production line. Along with the first shipment of 1,700 Panzerfausts in 44, 300 Panzerschreck and 3,000 rockets for them were delivered to Finland. In total, Finland would receive 1,854 launchers. According to troop surveys from July 1944, the Panzerschreck was considered the most effective and most reliable anti-tank weapon available to the infantry. This led to the same observation from both Finnish and German HQs that the weapons tended to make the soldiers overconfident and cause them to open fire too early, causing poor accuracy. The cons from the Finnish soldiers' perspective were mainly the bulk and the weight of a full battle loadout, and the fact that the 3-man teams were too small to move long distances with the entire kit. The other complaint was the weapon sticking out in the Finnish forests, which was prevented by painting them in different camo patterns. But in contrast to the Panzerfaust, the Panzerschreck was the cause of fewer accidents, probably because the weapon required one to get familiar with it in order to use it, causing soldiers to think about the flaming end. Only 17% of the rockets supplied to Finland were used by the end of the war, leaving a rather large reserve of 14,000 rockets. This meant that the weapon would be in service until the 1950s in Finland and being replaced by domestic designs at some point. To sum it up, it was better to have these than to not, and in the dense forests of Finland, they proved to be effective, especially for delaying retreats and roadside ambushes. That's it for this time. Hope you enjoyed. Check out jaegerplatoon.net if you haven't already. Take care.